Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. We're back already. It's Paul John Dykes and Chris McElwain, and we're going to be talking you through the next half hour in the lead up to the biggest test of the pre-season. It is Sporting Lisbon, the Portuguese champions, playing against Celtic tonight. The team is out. Shall we just go through that first, Chris, and we'll have a wee chat? Let's have a look at the start 11. Here we go. Right, start 11. We were talking earlier on, Chris, and young Patrick spoke about what he believed was the strongest starting 11. Wasn't far off of what we're looking at the moment.
He wasn't, no.
It wasn't far off it. So Kasper is in goals. Kasper saves, absolutely. Here's the thing, right? We'll run through this team one by one, but Kasper saves is obviously this. It's the T-shirt that Chalky is modelling. Chalky's sitting there talking to your mum and dad, I believe.
I was going to say there's a story behind this photo. When we were at the event with Brian McClare and Peter Grant, obviously I'm there early, I'm helping out, but you'd kindly allowed my folks, my great uncle, and my cousins to come along, my good lady as well. And so they were sitting in one of the booths at Grace's. So I got in a wee bit early, they're sitting there. And of course, here's this fella walks over and sits down with Kasper Saves T-shirt on. And it took my dad and my uncle Phil a couple of minutes to say, this is Brian McClare. And he just sat down and had, with his pint and just had a chat with him. And they were absolutely blown away. Lovely, lovely guy, I have to say. Him and Peter both. But yeah, I think that was I just made their night a wee bit extra special. So that photo at the time, they're sitting there just to the right of Chalky. You've got my dad, my uncle Phil, my mum, it's different people. So
that's Chalky. That's Chalky for you, man. Chocrates, Chocaldinho.
Do you know what? There's no airs or graces about him at all. He walked in. He just like a fella in a boozer, chatting to everybody. He was great. Really, really top guy. Really
By the way, I'm not bringing this up to punt merch because I'm not in that game. I'm not taking the flak for that. But that is an Acsom T-shirt, and the whole purpose of that is obviously Brian McClare played alongside Peter Schmeichel, Kasper's old fella, and that T-shirt, when we're talking about it, or when people see the photos on the socials, what I've got a sense of, there is a point here that what I'm getting a sense of here is that virtually the entire season of Kasper Schmeichel is boiling down to one performance against Aberdeen where he was clearly not 100% fit, Chris, and I think that's unfair.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's. We've almost deified Joe Hart at this point, and you saw that in terms of the big tifo before he left. He was a goalkeeper that we really took to our hearts, and we were really worried and concerned about who we were going to get to replace this guy, because even in such a short time, he really ingratiated himself to the support. So bringing Kasper Schmeichel, and suddenly we've got a keeper who is doing some of the things that Joe Hart was doing. Well, he's actually doing them better. Doing that typical Celtic goalkeeper thing, he's actually saving points on his own at times. He's had the odd error. I think very few, but he's had one or two wee blips. You show me a goalkeeper in world football that hasn't. The notable one was obviously the cup final. Look, it happened to his old fella on occasion. It happened to various different players at times. It's just one.
Lev Yashin didn't have a great game every week.
Exactly, I was going to say.
Remember fantasy football? Remember with the Pelé sketch? Aye,
that's right.
He was worse than Jason Lee. No, you're right, and I'm not comparing Kasper to Lev Yashin, but you're right. It's unfair. It's unfair to.
He has done more good than anything negative in his time with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back between the sticks tonight. So yeah, I think hopefully he's got at least another year with us. I think he's an absolute class act.
And you know what? A lot of our success in recent times has definitely been built on that brilliant goalkeeper, the influential goalie between the sticks, and I think we've almost been spoilt for keepers. There was one season, of course, where we didn't have a great one and we didn't win the league. But when you're thinking right back to Boric, other than Barkas, we have had a right good run of goalkeepers. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And Kasper for me. And obviously you covered the games, the first couple of games there, Chris. And we got a chance to see Ross Duhan. We got a chance to see Sinisalo. What I liked about him, the backup, Sinisalo, is how noisy, how loud, how commanding he is. Particularly in the game at the weekend there, where you could hear everything because it was behind closed doors. You could hear every shout, and you heard him for 45 minutes basically barking orders at his defenders, and I like that.
Yeah, you want a goalkeeper who's commanding at the back. I mean, one of the things that you always remember, goalkeepers see everything in front of them, right? So they've got to kind of be the eyes and the ears for the players that are playing just in front of them. You know, they've got to coordinate and direct and shift their defenders. And I think, you know, there has to be almost a synergy between your back line, whether it be 3 or 4 at the back, and your goalkeeper. And for me, the general at the back is the goalkeeper, right? And I think that's why so many successful football teams have had goalkeepers as captains, because they are able to see the game unfold in front of them. And they need to have that big personality, that big character. Now, Sinisalo's obviously come in. He's a player who we expect to develop under Kasper Schmeichel. But for me, that game embodied it. You're actually seeing some of the same characteristics, you know, that presence, that personality on the park. And we always talk about having, you know, leaders in different positions. The goalkeeper is one of the most critical for me. So good signs for Sinisalo. Ross Duan, I thought, looked okay in his outings. I think, you know, but very much has naturally slipped into that Scott Bain third choice role at the moment. I think we saw enough from Sinisalo when Kasper was out injured last season that he looks a more than capable replacement should it be needed at any point this season. I would love to see us do something similar that Liverpool did with Kelleher and actually see Sinisalo get the nod in cup games. And that way allows us not only to manage Kasper, use him domestically, use him for the big games in Europe, but give Sinisalo that responsibility of being maybe the first choice in the League Cup, for example, or the Scottish Cup even, depending on how he does. And I think that's a good way to start to elevate him up and see if he's capable of stepping into the shoes eventually.
I thought we'd have done it last season. I did think that, and I know that when we brought in Siegrist, and it looked as though we were going to use him as a League Cup goalkeeper. He played 2 games and then disappeared. So no, I totally agree with that. I think we need to give him game time. We spoke about whether or not Kasper should have came back for the final. This is now with hindsight. We talked about it all the way leading up to the game. And obviously after the event, you're thinking maybe Sinisalo should have kept the gloves, but you know, it's done, it's gone. We're looking at the back 4, Chris. One of the most interesting things in the bulletin this afternoon was the fact that John gave us the second and the third tier. Some of the positions didn't have a third tier actually. And there's a couple of choices in here that, well, Ralston and Murray definitely, Scales possibly, is the kind of second choice centre half, depending on what your argument is over Trusty or Scales. So the back 4 is Ralston at right back, of course, Kieran Tierney at left back, Murray and Scales. Murray is the backup to CCV. Scales is either your first choice or the backup to Trusty, depending on how you look at it. But are either of them, you know, strong enough to take us into the Champions League this season? I've heard the arguments about Scales. You know, Scales has performed well in certain games in the Champions League. There are also detractors, Chris. There are detractors who will tell you that, you know, in terms of Scales, he's a backup at best. To be honest with you, we're definitely one centre-half shot of having a right, strong defence. I mean, CCV plus another is still, for me, the situation.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I said today, and I'll set my stall out on it, that I think Scales, for me, on performance, is probably the strongest partner for Carter Vickers. But I don't think that was the intention, because the amount that we spent on Trusty gives me the impression that Trusty was firmly brought in to play that role. I just don't think Trusty's performances now merit it over Scales. Scales has continually found himself being called upon to come in and take on that role, either through injury, through poor performance by the player prior to him. So I think at the moment it should be Scales' jersey to lose. With that said, I understand some of the criticism that he gets. I do think it's a position we could upgrade on. And again, I don't mean that to be disrespectful to Scales, but I just think there is a level we could go up in that position. So I would say at this moment in time, with who's available, it is Scales' jersey to lose. But I would like to think that one of our recruitment priorities is bringing in someone of Carter Vickers' equivalent quality.
You know, when we're bringing in Trusty, you're looking at that thinking, right, in terms of the transfer fee, the age of the player, he's an international, obviously, alongside CCV. You can understand why you would think that was a good blend. When we're talking about the 3 big buys from last season, he's the guy, he does get criticism, but not as much as Engels and Ida. He's that third You know, he's the third tier of criticism. And I think that he's got a lot to prove, Chris. And, I'm not sure the gaffer is completely convinced with Austin Trusty at this stage. And, when you're looking at that lineup, you're thinking Scales is still the go-to. He's become almost that Greg Taylor figure who continually, any opposition, he just continually plays and puts in the performances, and the centre halves continually leave. I'm going to put it out there onto the comments. Let me know what you think. Trusty or Scales? Who's your first choice left-sided defender? We have, of course, already moved on Nawrocki and Lagerbielke, one permanently. We've got an injury to Stephen Welsh, the perennially seldom seen kid. I think for me, you've got to move Welsh on as well. And we need to bring in real quality at centre half. Tony Ralston is a backup. Again, you could maybe argue the toss around that one. Kieran Tierney, does he even have a backup? Well, listen, I'm looking forward to seeing him tonight again. We saw him for 45 minutes in the previous game, the behind closed doors one. We've got Thomas Todd coming in on the YouTube. Welcome to the show, Thomas. Casper wasn't fit in the final, as was Johnson. Both weren't fit. I mean, see the thing with that, you don't do the players any justice. I remember the League Cup final, the one where it was basically won by two players. It was won by Fraser Forster and Chris Julian. We beat Rangers 1-0. Man of the match for me was Jeremy Frimpong, who ended up getting sent off in the game.
That's right, What a performance.
He was amazing. He was brilliant. He was the only out ball. But I remember that day for a few things, and one of them was El Yunusi, a player that I did rate. I rated him highly.
A lot of people did.
He was miles off it, Chris. He was just out a moon boot, and it looked as though he was still wearing it in that final. And it did him no favours whatsoever because he had a stinker of a game. And then people are like, he didn't turn up. No, he wasn't fit. And this is the thing that we were talking about earlier in terms of squad management. How can we get to this stage, right, where we're going for 5 in a row? We've qualified for the Champions League group stages 3 seasons in a row, right? And we still don't have a 16, 18 strong squad where every single second tier player, you're thinking that's fine. Yeah, I'm pretty confident about that. Now, I know that comes to 22. But in terms of a 16 to 18 man squad, you're always going to have one or two that can adapt from position to position. And I'm looking at Ralston. I'm his biggest fan, as you know. I've no real concerns about Ralston. I've got more concerns about the left back position at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think the thing about Tony Ralston is that, and this is possibly a wee bit unfair on Tony. Not many of us see him as ever being the first choice right back. But I think very few of us have an issue with him being the second choice, being the backup, because he just has that kind of character about him. He's just a guy who doesn't, no fuss, no muss, gets his boots on, comes on, does the job when he's called upon. You never hear any stories about him kicking the toys at the pram in training. You never see him showing any frustration, on the bench. He just, for me, he's just a player that knows his job, knows his role, has kind of accepted his role. And look, if he's comfortable in that in terms of his career, fair play. But I would look at that bench, and if I'm looking at through all the names and all the faces on that bench, Tony Ralston's not one I'm concerned about in any way, shape or form.
No, I'd agree with it. I just got an email today, actually, for anybody else who subscribes to Celtic TV out there, and basically saying that it's going to flip. It's going to flip a system in terms of the payment system. So after tonight's game, you have to log in and you have to re-enter your details and renew it after tonight. So you've got to do that before Saturday. I was just saying to Chris beforehand, no looking for excuses or reasons to moan, but we're actually on here giving a pre-match, a preamble, and it would be phenomenal if indeed we were in a wee studio, and that will happen next season, Chris. But I'm flipping back and forward between Celtic TV and this stream that we're watching, and all they've got is a thumbnail with some music playing in the background. They don't even have a studio set up. I don't understand it. This is Celtic. And it's on a platform that you're paying for. Obviously, I'm not watching it today, but I did last week when I was on holiday.
Yep.
And I was watching it because going, this is not value for money. You want pre-match stuff, you want halftime stuff, you want a reaction at full time, and you're not getting any of that content. So for me, it's not value for money. Tommy Cassidy, you're on the YouTube. Think we can win the first half. May struggle when changes are made. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Tommy, in terms of the strength of the squad. And Danny Boy, is Bernardo away his mask for a piece and jam? I'm not sure what the Portuguese jam of choice would be. to be honest, Danny. Our man in Porto who commented on the bulletin at 12:30 might be able to tell us. But, Paulo Bernardo for me and Luke McCowan, we keep going on about all these big signings, but McCowan and Bernardo, I think this is a huge season for both players, right? We're talking about second choices. Both are second choices at this moment in time. And both of them, I think, have to prove something this season, or you genuinely look at them and say, right, what is your future at Celtic here? Because I think up to this point, Luke McCowan has survived on fumes. The momentum may be in, the guy that got lucky, the guy for the terraces, the Celtic fan who's in a jersey and all that. Right, that's gone now. We want to see performances from you. And by the way, I don't know what the stats were, but the eye test, his passing completion in the games that I've seen so far this pre-season has been very, very poor. Paulo Bernardo is a player that I rate highly. The Portuguese national team at under 21 level rate him so highly they kept playing him until he was 23. But in terms of Celtic, his second season has not been as effective as his first season, Chris, and he's now going into season 3. Massive season for the two players.
I would agree. I mean, I think they're very contrasting in terms of their style. Bernardo's quite introverted in terms of the way he plays, very, composed, takes his time, very measured sort of player. McCowan, very erratic, I think, very all energy, all action. Actually, it can work quite effectively in certain games. He does get forward, does get into positions and can get the goal. But yeah, you kind of trade off with McCowan as, loses possession a lot. A lot of what he does doesn't really come off. Sometimes looks a bit all over the place, a little bit like headless chicken. But look, he's very early in his tenure at Celtic as well. So, I can understand why both players are currently sitting in the sort of second string of the first team, which is fair enough. Bernardo was disrupted by injury, so you can sort of allow a little bit for that. But at the same time now, this is Celtic. You don't get too many second chances at this club. So I would like to see Bernardo take the step up and really make a play for a first team, surely, and make a play for the first team position. But it's now even harder because not only do we have Engels available, even though he's on the bench tonight, but you've now, by the looks at the formation tonight, you've got Nygren in there as well competing. So it's quite a saturated midfield group for what is essentially 3 positions in Brendan's typical system. So for me, at the moment, I'm not sure who's closer, whether it be Bernardo or McCowan, but I think neither of them are the first choice for either of those three, any of those 3 positions. For me, it's very much a fight between Kalmak, Hatate, Engels and Nygren at this point for the first choice berth. Not bad options to bring off the bench, to be fair.
But when you look at it tonight, and we were chatting about this before the game, of course, we have a player who has been given the number 8 jersey. Don't know how much onus is put on numbers these days. He's been given the number 8 jersey, but he will probably be playing right wing tonight, and that's Nygren, isn't it? And so, yes, he has been, for the 45 minutes that he's played for Celtic, he's been playing in the central midfield area. I expect him to be playing that wee bit further forward from Callum McGregor, but on the right-hand side, and obviously where Engels normally plays, and then Hatate on the left-hand side. And to be honest, it's only 45 minutes. He's a £1.7 million player. And somebody said earlier on, Chris, in terms of that type of player, bringing in Osmond from Fulham under 23s and bringing in Inamura, a 250 grand left back who's played 30 old senior games of football. If they turn out to be first picks this season, then the scouting team are absolute geniuses, right? What is it you say? They say you're a crackpot until you hit the jackpot, right? It's one of the ones. But as it looks on paper, you're thinking, I can see the Nygren thing. He's got Swedish credentials at international level. I can see why we brought him in. We've brought in players in the past with international, credentials, and Said Haksabanovic, £1.7 million, didn't work out. So I'm on the fence about that type of player, but I'm far more confident that Nygren brings a quality. Osmond never kicked a ball at senior football level. He's got a lot to prove for me. He's only 19, but if you're the secondary or you're the third choice striker at Celtic, and that is your background and that's your CV, for me, we need a higher level than that. We need someone who's already proven at this level, Chris.
Well, I'd probably take issue with your last comment there, saying that the recruitment team be geniuses if some of these players work out. I think they'd just be extremely lucky. And the reason why is when you look at Nygren, and I said this earlier today, he's got the profile of the player that you want a recruitment team to be looking at and bringing in, because Swedish international, top level football, lots of experience. He's established. He's a kind of player that you're not bringing him in as with a high degree of risk. He's a player that for me has a profile that says he'll come in and he'll be able to contribute right from the off. And Amura, who we've all spoken very favourably about in his first couple of relatively brief appearances, because he came in with absolutely no fanfare. But the reason for that is he doesn't have the profile of the type of player we should be recruiting, and that's no disrespect to the player or his ability. But the point is, if you're bringing in a player to augment and enhance the quality of our squad, he does not fit that profile in terms of his experience, in terms of his background, in terms of his his demonstrated level of ability. He's not played in competitions anywhere near the level of what we're going to be playing in, right? And that, again, is nothing to do with the play. It's not his fault. But that is on the recruitment team to have hopefully seen something in him that says, okay, he doesn't have the profile, he's not an obvious candidate, but we've seen enough to say, we think he'll come in and do something. But when the manager turns around and says, no, he's not first team ready, I don't know, I'm not aware of what this player can do, that demonstrates a huge disconnect between the recruitment side and what the manager's requirements are. And that's a big red flag for me. However, look, if the player comes in, and this will apply to Osman as well, if the players come in and really step up to a level out with their profile and actually play to the level we require them to play, then yes, it's fantastic business. But there's no way I'm giving credit to the recruitment team for, we saw something nobody else saw. No, you guys took a punt and got lucky. That's my personal view on it.
Well, the Inamura one looks like that at the moment, because you've got to base that on what Brendan Rodgers said before the game and then post-match. And listen, I want every player we sign to work out.
Absolutely.
But there's a certain calibre of player that you think, are they A, going to improve the first team squad, and are they B, going to enhance their chances of progressing in the Champions League? Because that needs to be your first. And you need to bring in, we've already lost one of those guys in Kuhn, arguably yes. Two in Kyogo, if you want to go back to January. We've not replaced either of those two yet. Greg Taylor was the left back, and he was a left back for a number of years, and we've upgraded him. We've upgraded him with Kieran Tierney, but we've not upgraded Kyogo at centre forward. We've not upgraded the right winger Kuhn, and that's why I think a lot of the comments come in and say we're actually weaker now than we were last season, and it's hard to argue with that. So when you're looking at that midfield of McGregor, Nygren and Hatate, Nygren does have, I think, more in common with Hatate than Engels does. So that's going to be interesting to see how they perform together. There's a bit of creativity in there, Chris.
I'm quite pleased. That would have been my only difference. If you're asking me who I would have liked to have seen tonight versus what Patrick said earlier, I would have liked to have seen Nygren in ahead of Engels. I want us to have more creativity in that central midfield. Engels, for me, and I've been a big defender of Engels from a lot of the detractors, but I do concede that I think we haven't found the right role or position for Engels yet to get the most out of him. And I like the fact that we're able to bring in a player like Nygren and possibly take a little bit of the heat off Engels a little bit, move him, onto the bench, maybe try something different. I would like to see us have a couple of different systems in midfield. So Hatate, we kind of know what he can do. He's the innovator. He's the risk taker. He's the one of those players that might embody the kind of classic number 10 characteristics. But if Nygren's coming in to do that as well, are we going to see more of a box-to-box role for Hatate, for example? Is Nygren going to bring something different to the table? Kalmak, does that mean he's very much that holding midfielder? Could Engels come in and possibly give Kalmak some relief at some point? So I'm keen to see how the three of them play together, and I think it's quite interesting. I think we'll see Nygren playing centrally tonight because we've got Forrest and Maeda on along with Ida, so you'd assume that Forrest and Maeda are on the flanks tonight.
Oh, there will be. There's no doubt about that. And I think also when you're looking, I'm just laughing at some of these comments. Honestly, I love the humour that comes through here. And there's a few things I'm dying to share with you earlier on talking about humour, because I was with Phil Differ earlier on, who is a comedic genius. This week's This Is Acsom is one of those talking heads episodes where we've got basically 3 or 4 Celtic heads just chewing the fat about Celtic. And this week it's myself, Jim Orr, and Phil Differ. The guy is just a natural. He's an absolute natural. And there's a couple of things on diet, but I don't want to waste Friday night, so I'm going to zip it. I'm going to zip it. A couple of good funnies and a brilliant suggestion actually as well. But again, you're going to have to wait for that. Welsh is a new MJ. We were talking earlier on about things we're not happy with at the football club. And one of the things I continually go back to is the youth development. I think the one thing with Mikey Johnston is that he was a different type of player from that type of player that we are produced at the moment, which is very much a kind of clone. The guy that does well at Celtic, Chris, is the guy that, you know, just kind of keeps his nose clean and doesn't do anything Maverick style and it isn't that creative. And there seems to be a certain type of player that our academy produces for the first team. And I am going to do this. I've been promising for long enough. I'm going to have a look at the graduates over the last 20 years and see how many of them have played 50 or more games for the football club. Because if you haven't, then you've not really made it at Celtic. And I don't think there's been many who have. Mikey Johnston played more games than that, and obviously we made a few quid off him. I think Stephen Welsh will be leaving this pre-season, if not permanently, then certainly on loan. William O'Toole reckons that Scaldino and Trusty are much of a muchness. What do you think of the comments? Who would you play? Would you rather play Scales or Trusty? Who's your first choice? Who's your backup? Jamie Murphy, the bench for tonight is very weak. Let's bring it back up and have a look at that because I think it is. And here is the bench. Let's remove that wee comment so that we can see what we're doing. And it's Sinisalo and Doohan and Clark, 3 goalies. Rice, Trusty, Yang, McEwen, Osmond, Tillio, Kenny, Inamura, Engels, Summers, Montgomery, McPherson, Ewer, McArdle, Donovan, Izaguzzo. Do you think we're going to have a different team in the second half again?
I would hope there isn't wholesale changes because it tends to turn the second half into a bit of a training match. And you've spoken about some of the younger players. I really feel sorry for a lot of the younger players just now. Based on the evidence we've seen in the past couple of pre-season friendlies, I feel they're being hamstrung by trying to fit into a system rather than being given the chance to kind of spread their wings a little bit as players. I look at players like Ben Doak, Karamoko Dembele, these kind of guys who have, Cummings, these kind of guys who've up and left to go to other clubs, and they're all creative, dynamic type players. And I wonder, is that because they're not getting the opportunity to really show what they can do? And I felt there was a lack of individuality in the previous games from our younger players. I felt as though they were trying too hard just to fit into the system that the first team plays. Now I get the logic behind that, right? I get the I do get the logic of they want to show that they're first team ready, therefore they want to play to the same style and the same sort of standard the first team does. But are you doing that at the expense of showing that you can do something different? Because at times playing that way wasn't creating anything. It was target to watch. We're retaining possession, but we're not doing anything. But surely a pre-season friendly against what you'd have to consider as significantly lesser opposition in the likes of Queen's Park and Cork City, no disrespect to either. Go and show what you can do. Showcase your skills. And again, I go back to the point I made earlier today. I listened to Thierry Henry talking, and he says, look, as a winger, he said, even at the risk of losing possession 5-6 times, only takes one occasion where you beat your man and you create something and you win a game. And nobody remembers the 5 or 6 times that you lost possession, but they remember what you did when you won the game. And I just think, if I was a young player, that's the mindset I would have, particularly as a young attacking player. Look, again, as I say many times, very easy for me to sit here and say that. And I know the pressure that these young players are under. But yeah, I would like to see, if we do see changes and we see some of the young guys coming on, and I'm sure they've got ability, I'm sure they've got the potential to have great careers, but this is your opportunity. This is your opportunity. Take a risk and show what you can do.
Yeah.
Well, they might 10 years from now, they might look back and say, why did I not take that risk?
Well, exactly. And I think that because they know, John made this point earlier, they know that they're going to have very few opportunities throughout the season. They're playing a wee bit within themselves. There's a fear there. One of the interesting things that came out of today's discussion, Chris, actually was, because obviously we're in the pre-season and we're talking about transfers. was the amount of quality that we have lost in the last 4 seasons. So here's a team. And I want you to tell me in the comments, and I want Chris to tell me before we get to the action, is that if this is a stronger team than the one that we currently have in terms of the strongest starting 11. Joe Hart, Josip Juranovic, Greg Taylor, Carl Starfelt, Chris Ayer. Who else have we got here? Matt O'Reilly, Nicholas Kuhn, Leo Bada, Giacomakis, Kyogo, and Ryan Christie. Is that a stronger team than the strongest starting 11 that we have right now? Chris McElwain?
Yes. Not by a huge margin, but yes. Yes. And I think the players who really sum that up, I would say O'Reilly, Kyogo, probably Ayer, Christie, and I wouldn't necessarily say Juranovic, but Starfelt as well. So yeah, there's a few players there that I don't think we have replaced. I'd say O'Reilly, Kyogo, and Starfelt in particular, the ones that really stand out. They've not been replaced.
The thing is, it's not like you're saying, which team would win, the first 9 in the row team or the second 9 in the row. These are players who have just left the football club, and only one of them, as far as I know, Joe Hart, has retired from football. So they could all virtually still play, although Joe Hart will be playing against Man U. I've seen that Larsson's coming out for that game as well. I don't know if he's playing or if he's going to be the manager. I saw that earlier on today. The teams are almost ready to kick off. Obviously, it's the Hoops versus the Hoops. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Let's go and check out the action, and we'll be back at half-time on a Celtic State of Mind.